So I'm an 80s child, and I was born in the 70s, but grew up in the 80s and watching Popeye cartoons. And if you're an 80s kid, you'll get this reference, and if you're younger than that, suck it up. But I've had all I can stands, and I can't stands no more, and it's time for a little rant. And so I've just moderated enough comments and talked to enough people and watched enough idiots on Facebook and on YouTube, for that matter, dig themselves a hole that they may very well never be able to pull themselves out of, and I can't handle it anymore. So I'm just going to be straight with you for just a minute about the realities of the law of self-defense. And if you can't handle it, if the hurt is too much, well then fine, I get it. But stand by for a little rant about people's stupidity with respect to the laws regarding self-defense in America. Today's video is brought to us in part by the generosity of luckygunner.com. For the best selection of name brand defensive ammunition and lightning fast shipping on bulk target ammo, head to luckygunner.com and thank them for being a sponsor of Active Self-Protection. I think this is like most of social media, quite frankly. People are incredibly low information and they think they know things they don't know, and so then they spout off opinions like they're smart about things without ever having done any research on the topic, or at most doing a Google search. And friends, I know so many people that have a Google law degree or a Facebook law degree, and they think that's enough, that they will understand the law and they will be just proof from any kind of legal accusation or any problems legally when they defend themselves, and they're going to talk themselves right into a jail cell. And the self-defense community, those who are all about moral and lawful self-defense, are law-abiding people. Now, we should recognize that we need to understand the law, and people think all kinds of myths about legal and moral self-defense, and they spout them like they're fact, and they defend them to the death, and that stuff drives me nuts because the stupidity will get you sent to prison. You see, friends, there's really not just the fight for your life. You see, there's the fight before the fight to not get victimized. Then there's the fight during the fight, which you gotta win or you might well get killed. And then there's the fight after the fight, which is the fight for the rest of your life after the fight for your life. And if you get sent to prison, that's not a positive outcome. I get people all the time, well, I don't care what the law says, I'm just gonna defend myself, and if I have to go to prison, then I go to prison. That's not helpful when you're the queen of Cell Block C and you get to sleep every night with Bubba looking down on you and deciding when you get to go to sleep and when you get to be close friends. That's not a positive outcome. Why would you want that? Why would you be like, well, that's preferable to anything else, it's okay? When you have the ability to do it the right way, to avoid prison entirely, and get the kind of training, the kind of knowledge, the kind of experience that will keep that from happening. And why would you rather stay ignorant than that? Drives me nuts. Now here's another problem that I see people do all the time. I had this with this guy the other day in a group that I'm in on Facebook and my personal profile, and wherever I go I'm a teacher, and this guy was like, well, it's totally fine. It was this discussion of a guy who ended up shooting a guy who jumped into his car. And we were talking about it. He's like, oh, it's totally fine what he did. That's great. You can shoot somebody over property and I'll sleep like a baby. And I'm like, you really can't shoot people over property, friend. You use a firearm to stop somebody who's just stealing property. In the vast majority of places, you are going to prison for that. That's a terribly bad idea. And he's like, no, it's not. That's not the case. And so then he's like, well, this was in Illinois. It's where the incident was. And so Illinois law dictates. And I'm like, yep, here's the statute that Illinois law says you can't do that. Well, it says this. Well, no, it doesn't. That's defined in the statute. Here's the statute. Yeah, but that's not the case. Oh, well, here's what the statute says, and here's what the language says, and they define what the language says in this statute, and so I wouldn't do that because it'll get you sent to prison. Okay, Mr. Internet Lawyer, I'm just reading statutes to you. I'm just telling you what they mean. But if you don't do that homework and you don't do that research and you don't guide yourself and let yourself be guided by people who actually know what the heck they're talking about and have actually got some certification and some experience in the matter, you will go down that kind of path. And this dude who was arguing with me, according to his own discussion, he could just be an internet liar, was a 10-year federal cop. Please stop listening to idiots. And here's the reality. The worst people in the world to take advice from on self-defense law? Well, the number one worst person to take advice from in self-defense law is somebody with a CCW, who sat through a few hours of training and probably misunderstood it, probably doesn't know what the heck he's talking about. You know, the number 2 person that's probably the dumb one to take self-defense legal advice from is a cop. Yes, I'm going to say it. Most cops are woefully inadequately trained in the law of self-defense, and in particular on what it means to legally and morally defend yourself. Yes, they're going to write up a recommendation. Yes, they're going to send that recommendation to the prosecuting attorney. But most street cops and most cops in general have very little idea of what is actually allowed in the use of deadly force. And their laws of self-defense for them as on-duty police officers are different than yours as a CCW holder. So don't get your legal advice from most cops. You know who's another bad source of advice? Attorneys. Most attorneys, well, my brother-in-law is an attorney, and so he can tell me all about what the heck it is. So then my next question is, well, what kind of attorney is your brother-in-law? Is your brother-in-law a real estate attorney? Yeah, a real estate lawyer. A real estate lawyer is really going to know about criminal law, and within criminal law is going to know about defensive law and the justification and the use of force. Sure they are. They're going to take all this time out of their specialty, which is a huge specialty of real estate and has all its own laws, and take time out to learn this other thing that's not going to make them any money in their practice. Of course they are. Or maybe they're not, and maybe trusting an attorney who's not a specialist in self-defense law and a specialist in criminal defense is like saying, well, that a plumber is good enough to, hang a sheetrock for you, or somebody that has a specialty in one area of construction can do something else for you. That's dumb. Another problem that I see people doing with incredible regularity is they go, well, I can read statutes. Well, really? Because you got a problem here. You think those statutes are written in English, and they're not. They're written in lawyer. And so if you think that a word means what you think it means, it probably doesn't mean what you think it means, because there's more than just the black letter law. Yes, you have statutory law, but you also have case law, and you have jury instructions, and you have common law, and understanding how the case law applies in your case and what other case law might apply but doesn't actually have direct bearing but maybe indirect bearing on the underlying issues is something you ain't going to get with your Google Law degree, friends. You're just not. And I see people all the time that they're like, oh, this statute talks about, force, and I can use force here. And I say, well, it talks about force, but not deadly force. Deadly force is a different statute. Well, it says force, that's enough. No, there's a particular statute on that. And then people think that the law where they are applies somewhere else, and it probably doesn't. It might. There might be a similar statute, but it might not. So you got to recognize that what's going on in your jurisdiction might not be in someone else's jurisdiction. And of course, the worst of these is Texas. People in Texas think, oh, I know in Texas I can shoot somebody and, they're in the front yard, you drag them in the house and it'll be fine. Nope, that'll get you sent to prison for, obstruction of justice, tampering with a crime scene, falsifying evidence, all kinds of fun stuff. You're going to go to jail for that. Or, well, yeah, man, somebody's stealing my car, I can shoot them in Texas and it'll be just fine. In a very rare few instances, you think you might understand Texas Penal Code 9.43, but if you don't understand 942 and 943 incredibly well, you're setting yourself up to go to prison. And yes, Texas has a unique culture when it comes to self-defense, and Texas allows some things that are completely unique in the law of self-defense, but not as unique as you think, and you abuse those, you go to prison just like that too, friend. So where do you go to get some actual stuff? Where do you go to get some actual knowledge? Well, shoot, guys like me and a bunch of other folks who I respect so highly have taken an awful lot of training to get to where we can actually give some qualified and informed opinions on these kinds of things, which, of course, probably the most qualified opinion is subject matter experts, people who not only are competent in an area, but have expertise in that area, and they do that by long example. And of course, if you've been on the Extra channel for any kind of length of time, you saw a few weeks ago I took Masad Ayoub's Mag 40 class. And yes, a guy like Mas Ayoub is an absolute subject matter expert and knows it not only from the black letter law, not just from the case law, the jury instructions, common law, all that stuff. From the courtroom perspective, he has experience and knowledge that builds those kind of things. And so taking his class would be a great way to learn what the actual law of self-defense actually is and keep you out of actual prison. But let's just say you can't afford to take a Masad Ayoub class, or he's not coming to your area anytime soon. Guess what? You can go on Amazon. This is a copy of his book, Deadly Force. It's his newest one. Now how much this is right now? It's $9.50. I'll put a link in the description if you want to grab one. Yes, it'll be an affiliate link because, that's how I feed my family. Good gracious sakes, you guys. $10 and you get over 200 pages, 230 some odd pages of the best that he has to offer with other defense experts on the law of self-defense. There's another book that he just kind of edited that's even more recent called Straight Talk on Armed Defense with a whole bunch of subject matter experts in their area of expertise. That's another book that's like $20. So just getting those two books, you've spent like $25 to $30 and you've got a ton of actual knowledge that you can say, hey, look, I read this book, read it on this date, this is what's going on, and I actually understand. And then here's my next question for you. When somebody says, wait a minute, why, somebody gives an opinion and you ask, wait a minute, is that a qualified opinion? Do you have a qualified opinion to teach me or to lead me in this area? Let me tell you, okay, most firearms instructors are not qualified to teach the law of self-defense. So somebody's got an NRA firearms instructor certificate. That does not qualify them to teach legal self-defense. Somebody has even a Rangemaster certification. That alone does not qualify them to teach the law of self-defense. There are a couple of programs that I would recommend for non-attorneys that can teach you and give you the qualifications to be able to talk about the law of self-defense in a qualified manner. Yes, I think somebody who has graduated from Mag 40 has a great background. Do I think they have a teaching background? I don't know that it's quite there yet. Most cops don't have that background. Even most attorneys, yes, they've got a JD, but what training in the law of self-defense, what practice in the law of self-defense do you have so that you know that this is something you can actually speak on? Go and do that. Couple that I would recommend, well, Mass does a deadly force instructor certification. And if somebody has the DFI certification, then they are definitely qualified. There's another one I'm just going to go ahead and tell you this one. So there's a guy named Andrew Branca. He's written a book called The Law of Self-Defense. And he has a verified instructor graduate program. And somebody who has completed Andrew's verified, his graduate program in the law of self-defense is qualified to talk about the law of self-defense. I'm a little hesitant because if you watch him on social media, he hates me and he can't quit me and he keeps talking about me. That's irrelevant to the fact. His book is a fine book. There's a lot of good information in it. I'd recommend that one as well, Law of Self-Defense. And if somebody is a verified instructor graduate from that program, they are also qualified to talk about the law of self-defense and help you to see how to morally and legally defend yourself. So please, people, do more than your Google Law degree. Do more than just read a statute that you think you understand. Dive in there a little bit. Read a couple of books. Take a class. Actually invest some in the fight after the fight so that you actually know what happens in a lethal force encounter and in the aftermath of a lethal force encounter. So you're not one of those folks that are like, well, if you shoot somebody, just tell a cop, nope, I don't want to say nothing, I need my lawyer. That's not the right way to go. That's the kind of stuff that puts you on a path that starts building momentum that makes you look like the perpetrator and not like the victim. Instead, please get some knowledge. Please get some understanding. Because otherwise, not only do you look like an idiot online, but God forbid you ever have to use your gun in self-defense, it will make your life harder to win the fight after the fight as well. Please, thank you.